Good day, and welcome to today's webinar, sponsored by UC Berkeley Center for Studies in Higher Education. I am Margaret Heisel, a senior research associate here at the center. Now, I will moderate today's session. CSHE, as a long-organized research unit at UC Berkeley, identifies strategic policy issues, conducts and also publicizes good research on higher education. And our webinars are an essential feature of CSHE goals. Today's webinar on AI is focused on an issue that is so very important for higher education, as well as for many other aspects of our world. And our speaker, C. Edward Watson, has researched and published valuable information on AI. He is Vice President for Digital Innovation at the Association of American Colleges and Universities, AACNU. And here is just one of his many valuable books. He has a new book on teaching and learning with AI that is emerging now. He will speak today for about 45 minutes of our webinar, and then he will respond to questions that you have registered, you have posed upon registration or on your screen during the presentation. And now I say, Ed, please begin your lecture. Please begin, and thank you.
Well, Margaret, thank you so much for the invitation and for that kind and generous introduction. I'm really glad to be here and to share some of the key components of mine and my colleague Jose Bowen's most recent book entitled Teaching with AI. I guess where I'd like to begin with is just sort of like the notion that probably all of us have someone in our lives that brings new innovations, new exciting things forward to us. For me, that person is my youngest son, Carter. So this is a photo of him. He had signed up a time for us to go to the Apple store and try out the Apple Vision Pro. And usually whenever he invites me to do something, it begins with the preface, "Hey, Dad, you're going to love this. This is going to change your life." So he'll send me links or take me someplace or try out a new technology. And that's how he frames things. I got to tell you, it rarely plays out that way. The Apple Vision Pro glass was a really good example of that, where, you know, the thing is like about 500 pounds on your head. And I just couldn't see typing in the air like this, you know, what kind of new version of carpal tunnel might I get from actually trying to use that as a productivity tool. But it's a lot of fun. You know, he's bringing me stuff all the time. But, you know, the whole change your life kind of thing usually doesn't play that way. But he came home from college in December 2022 for the holidays, came in, first thing he said was, "Hey, Dad, have you heard of ChatGPT?" And I said, "I have not heard of this." And he said, "Dad, it's going to change your life." And I was like, okay, here we go again. So he said, no, come here. Let's sit down. And we sat down at the kitchen table and he opened up his laptop and he said, "Okay, so what do you ask students to do?" And I said, "What do you mean? Like an assignment?" And he said, "Yeah, like what's one of your favorite assignments?" And so I described it to him. And he said, "Okay, I want you to type that in here." And so I'm in ChatGPT and I type it in. And then as the text begins to scroll on the screen, it's now in family lore that I apparently sort of unconsciously under my voice said, "Oh no," because I instantly saw the ramifications in terms of academic integrity and challenges to what we traditionally do within our classrooms. I spent like the next 4 hours playing with it. My son had to wrestle his laptop away from me as I spent more and more time with it. But I think he was right that this in many ways changes a lot of things. Indeed, I think that AI is changing the way that we work. I think it's changing thinking, how we actually engage in tasks and work that we do. I think it's also, and very much sort of like a grade notion, that AI is changing what our expectations for average might be, and that AI is changing creative activities. So I'll talk more about that. I think whenever the World Wide Web first came about, so, 1991, the web launched. Before that, information was fairly scarce, but it was dependable. So if you found information, so you go to the library and you take a book off the shelf, you'd feel really good about that, the quality of that information. But as the World Wide Web began to unfold and we got to Web 2.0 and social media and the like, information was then ubiquitous. It was everywhere, but then it was becoming less and less trustworthy. But really, the web was largely about knowledge, like information, the information age, being able to access information. And then I alone would figure out what to do with that information. Well, with the launch of OpenAI's, that's the parent company, ChatGPT, it moved away from just simply delivering information to us, but rather becoming a part of our thinking process, the way that we do our work, the way that we think. And so some examples from the world of work are already out there. There's a range of different ways that AI is being used. And a lot of the energy right now, especially because of the way it impacts higher education, a lot of the focus is on what is known as generative AI. But AI has been present for quite a while. If you have a self-driving car, or if you've ever gotten a ticket for running a red light or being in the wrong lane, well, AI took care of that for you. But another example, this isn't generative AI, but how it's currently being used is for a lot of medical scans that are looking for cancers. AI will often now take the first pass. And so rather than a radiologist reading, looking at every pixel, at every line through a scan, now the AI will take the first scan and it'll say, okay, look here. So the human has a partnership role here. The AI says, right here, something that concerns the AI. So then a human would then examine that and confirm. But as a result of AI now having a role in this partnership with humans in diagnosing and finding things such as cancers, AI is, with its help, we're now detecting 20% more cancers than previous conventional models. A new thing that's emerging that is around generative AI are products within the healthcare industry that's going to change our relationship with our primary care physician. I love my family care doctor, but he usually rolls in with a cart with the laptop on it. Probably many of you experience something similar to this. Rolls in with the laptop, and a lot of the time is spent typing. And there, every once in a while, he'll turn and he'll talk to me, and then he'll go back and he's putting in codes for insurance purposes and the like. But he's getting ready to pilot a new tool that specifically listens while he actually converses with me. So he's not typing the whole time. He's actually spending most of his time seeing me, not the technology. But the technology is taking notes and it's putting in insurance codes. And so then his role is a partnership role, where then after he has finished his session with me, he then would review the notes and the coding to make sure that it's accurate before it's actually filed and move forward. So it's changing the medical industry significantly. I was at a medical university last week, I believe, and hearing the array of different ways that AI has made a presence or is beginning to make new impacts within that field. Within the field of law, they're finding that AI can do a lot of the tasks that lawyers do, especially the tasks associated with junior lawyers, can do work faster and do it better. In fact, I was talking with a colleague at Rutgers a couple of weeks ago, and he shared that human lawyers are really good at finding things that are wrong in contracts. They're often not as good at finding things that are missing. So they're finding that AI, generative AI, reviewing contracts is pretty good at both. So they've made some shifts in how they do contracting at Rutgers, where AI is now reviewing contracts and marking up contracts and suggesting text and the like. I think it's an interesting note, though, if we do find that there are some professions where work that may have been done by junior level people can be done quite well by AI. Well, how will we ever get senior level people if we don't have people that spend 10 years doing sort of junior level work? I think that there's a challenge that might be ahead of us as the use of AI unfolds and as it matures. But part of the marketing for the tools within the law area is again sort of pushing toward the notion that, like in the medical field, that this actually will free you up to actually do more of what AI can, to see the client, not the technology, to see the patient, not the technology. We're already seeing that there are AI bots that are appearing that play roles either online or whenever you make calls into a call center. And research is showing that AI for those kinds of purposes are actually increasing customer sentiment. They like the experience, that fewer people ask to speak to the manager because the case is resolved, the issue is resolved, whatever they called for is taken care of. And actually, the number of cases that are resolved is actually increasing per hour. So this technology, in that particular context, is doing making improvements. There's also the world of programming. I think that we've probably all heard stories of how well generative AI can create computer code. And in fact, a study at Google used it for bug fixes. The bug fix process is typically you assign a bug fix to a programmer. The programmer then creates the bug fix, codes the fix, and then gives it to a quality assurance person who then either, they test it and then they either put it into production or they put it back to the coder to resolve whatever the new issue was that they found. But they found that having AI, so you have to prompt AI, of course, but asking AI to create the bug fixes, they actually make it through the QA process at a higher rate than those that were coded by humans. So lots of different domains. I guess what I'm most hopeful about is that maybe AI will make all of us happier because we can kind of outsource the tedious work that either we don't like to do or that we don't do well, and then we can focus more on things that we really like or really care about or that AI can't do. What are the strengths that we as humans, what is our humanity that we bring forward that enables us to be happier at our work, but also do that kind of work even better because we have more time for it. There was a study out of Stanford that looked at the federal job index. So it's certainly not every job on the planet, but looking within that job database, looking at all of sort of the tasks, like, positions are essentially just tasks, all jobs are things that you do. And that study found that 100% of jobs in that job base have at least one task that AI can do better today. So it's really likely that we're going to see generative AI have a broad presence within the world of work. There was a survey late this past year by Amazon World Services that surveyed employers and employees across every business sector. And across every business sector, 93% of employers, so nearly all employers, said that they expect to use generative AI in the workplace. If they're not already using it or have it right ahead of them, they, looking down at a trajectory of 5 years, they see generative AI being present and being used for, one or more purposes or tasks. Employees surveyed at these same businesses had a little bit less of an expectation that generative AI was coming, but 86% of employees said that they expect to be using it in the near future, if not already. But it was clear from this survey that employers are recognizing a skill gap, that they're having trouble locating employees that have the AI skills that they currently need today in the workplace. But it was also interesting to see that employers often noted they saw higher education as the key mechanism within our economy to solve that skills gap. So we're being seen as a solution, we higher ed being seen as a solution. Employers also said that whenever they're able to locate people with the AI skills, they're expecting there to be a salary boost for those individuals. So if you have AI skills and as you're on the job market, you're likely to make more than a counterpart who doesn't have those skills. Employers were also asked, well, what exactly do you need skill-wise to be able to use AI well? And some of the skills that are listed from this survey should be actually, it should be affirming for us, but also kind of not surprising. I mean, critical thinking is the number one expected skill that someone needs to be able to use AI well, but there's also creative thinking or creative design, ethics, communication, writing, teamwork, these are all things that employers see are important skills for using AI well. But when you look at this list, and if you look across higher ed at most of our, like our general education curricula, where most of us have learning outcomes defined for that particular curriculum, this is pretty much the greatest hits of gen ed learning outcomes, critical thinking, being able to write, ethics, teamwork, things like that. So higher ed is indeed quite well positioned to prepare students not only with these skills, but to use these skills within an AI context. So there's a lot of discussion and around that notion of AI literacy, and different models are appearing out there. But typically what you hear in different discussions around AI literacy, it's like, well, certainly some technical skills, right? You understand the landscape and when you would use one tool over another tool in terms of generative AI. But then also you get a product from AI, you had to prompt it. So that notion of prompt engineering and what does that look like and how does that work? That's another skill that's part of AI literacy. Then you get a product, being able to look for bias, consider ethical concerns, look for evidence of hallucinations. I mean, it's really about evaluating, analyzing, evaluating, and further editing. In fact, there was in the Chronicle, maybe 5 weeks back now, there was someone who said, why would we have AI, do course design for us whenever we're the experts? And I think that was a false binary, because I think really it's not about it doing it for us. It's about doing it with us. As the title of my book suggests, teaching with AI is that we have a new collaborator. So it's, if there's a course you've never taught before, and to ask it for a syllabus on that particular topic, or, how can I teach behavioral psychology. How might I rename this course to be attractive to students in the physical therapy world? I mean, you can get a lot of different ideas. Of course, we're the lead author, right? I mean, we get ideas, we get drafts of things from AI, but all responsibility for the final product resides for us, the user of the AI. So that's one thing to kind of very much keep in mind. We're not outsourcing it to do it for us. Rather, it's a partner in doing the work with us. So I think, as I think about the challenges that I'm seeing in the world of work, as well as sort of those academic, issues, academic integrity issues that I noted whenever I first saw generative AI, I think there's a key tension that has now emerged for higher ed that most programs throughout higher ed are going to have to address. I think specifically, it's this tension between, well, we already have learning outcomes for our courses, and now there's a technology that students might leverage to do a lot of the work within the courses. So do we ban it? Do we keep it out of the classroom? How do we keep it out of the classroom so that we can ensure that we can continue to teach our current outcomes? So that's, again, this is a false binary, but that's like one extreme. Keep it out. We don't want to use it. We want to preserve our current set of course practices. And then at the other end of this is like, well, we know higher ed has many purposes, but one of the purposes for most students is, I go to college so that I can get a job post graduation. So how do we prepare students for that world of work? And then given the current landscape of work, it suggests that we need to be thinking about how we might engender AI literacy, AI infused learning outcomes as a core component of our curriculum. I think it's going to vary from one program to the next and one discipline to the next, but I think it's kind of a both and. Like, how do we continue to achieve these learning outcomes while also preparing students for the world of work that awaits them? I think this is a non-trivial challenge. And with the World Wide Web that I mentioned earlier, we had a nice long arc of it kind of coming on board and slowly, moving forward and becoming more widely adopted. And then online courses became a thing. And we're in a unique position in that this innovation has been so widely and quickly adopted by students and in the world of work, so that we don't have a 10-year arc. We probably all need to be thinking about how we can make curricular changes and then pedagogical changes to ensure students indeed achieve the range of outcomes that we might have for them, either being supported by AI or to develop AI or without AI altogether. I think it's the new grand challenge for higher education today, at least in terms of teaching and learning. So at the American Association of Colleges and Universities where I work, we're launching a new institute on AI, pedagogy, and the curriculum designed specifically to help programs and maybe even entire colleges and universities think through this grand challenge and help move them forward. Every campus that participates will send a team, and the team will be given a national expert that will work with them from mid-September to mid-April this coming academic year to help think through the nuance of not only the curricular and pedagogical issues, but academic integrity challenges, policy challenges, ethical challenges, all of those kinds of things. So I want to pivot and talk a little bit about the world of AI currently, especially around generative AI. I think often people talk about generative AI as if it's this one thing, as if it's monolithic, like there's just one product, and pretty much everyone has heard of ChatGPT at this point. But it's not the only product on the landscape, and there are other products that do things differently. So there are maybe 6 exceptionally large language models out there. There's lots of other AI products out there that leverage generative AI. I'll talk more about that as we kind of go forward. But just generally speaking, this is an oversimplified picture of the landscape. But there's, Google's Gemini project. It was previously called Bard, and they rebranded it maybe 2 months ago. And then there's Claude from Anthropic, and then there's OpenAI's ChatGPT. And there's actually 2 versions of ChatGPT. So there's the free 3.5 version of ChatGPT, and then there's the one that you have to pay $20 a month for, that is ChatGPT 4. So when ChatGPT 4 first came out, it was free, and then OpenAI made it where you had to pay $20 a month for it. But then there was still this other free version, ChatGPT 3.5, but they dumbed it way down so that it's much slower and not as smart as the first version of ChatGPT 3.5 that came out in November of 2022. But Microsoft has invested heavily in OpenAI, nearly a co-owner of that particular project. So they have come to market with something called Copilot, which I'll talk about more here in just a second. And then, of course, there's Elon Musk's Twitter X product called Grok. Grok is kind of like the uncle that you really don't want your kids to be around all that much. There's a lot of bias, kind of leans into the bias sphere. Grok does. But so you have this as sort of like the larger models, but there's lots of other tools out there. Here's some examples. And these tools are leveraging the ChatGPT brain. So there's other tools that are doing this as well. And I think what you're going to see is many of the other products having an app store, if you will, in the same way that ChatGPT sort of has either a GPT store that's within the paid version of ChatGPT. It's just called GPTs. But then there's also other websites that are leveraging and using that brain. So I mentioned that ChatGPT 4.0 is a paid app through OpenAI, but Copilot, so copilot.microsoft.com, is exactly the same version of ChatGPT, but it's a free gateway through Microsoft. So this landscape is continuing to evolve, but there are free ways to gain access to these tools. But ChatGPT has this thing called an open API, which enables anyone with some programming skills to make little versions, little tools that'll do various things like research or writing or create computer code and the like. But it's leveraging that ChatGPT brain. I imagine we're going to see this with all of the large language models over time, in the same way that, Apple was the first one to come to market with the Apple Store. And then, other phone providers have their own app stores now as well. So we'll see. I mean, in many ways, we're kind of in like the Napster days or the Ask Jeeves days of web browser invention. I mean, this is a new space that's been broadly adopted quickly, but there's also many things to change. Like Apple hasn't come to market yet with a product, and they're likely to partner with one of the products you see at the top row of the screen right here. So yes, it's still very much unfolding, but as of today, this is a general snapshot of where we are. So I talk about this new tension. I guess I want to spend the remainder of my time before we open it up to some Q&A to just talk about the strategies that are available to higher ed to address this grand challenge, this false binary, this tension, this variety of new goals that we have to accomplish. And I should say, as I share these strategies, none of them I think are mutually exclusive. It could be that you'll see all the 7 or 8 of these that you would want to use, and there's others that may not make really good sense. But certainly the inclination when generative AI first came to market was to ban it. But most students say that if you ban it, I'm still going to use it. In fact, a survey last January, so 15 months ago, we saw that 89% of students at that point said that they had already tried ChatGPT. There's been a range of surveys since then that show even as few as 22% of students say that they've used generative AI. I think it kind of depends on who's asking. We did a lot of focus groups prior to the publication of the Teaching with AI book. And, whenever I would first ask, a group of students, how many of you have used ChatGPT? And there would be almost no hands that would go up. And then I would say, look, I'm writing a book and I'm interested in just knowing more about how you use it. I don't really, I have no judgment here. They're like, oh, well, then all the hands would go up, that they would admit. So I think there's a lot of self-selection bias maybe in the responses to many of these surveys, especially given that the use rate back in January of 2023 was so high. But if we do say that it's cheating and that we ban it, there are a number of things that we can do as alternative strategies. I do think these have a place in higher ed. I mean, there are times that we'll want to see what students can do without technology. So proctoring or, just having, if you're teaching a large class, maybe having extra TAs to provide surveillance within the room. My son, I mentioned at the beginning, Carter, he this past winter break had brought up this thing. He said, I had to go buy this thing. It was a quarter, and everyone calls it the Blue Book. And I was like, me and my wife looked at each other, romantically, like, remember the good old days when we had the Blue Books? So, I mean, a lot of the old strategies that have been used in the past, I think, do have a place as we go forward. But there's a notion of trying to label it as cheating. One of the most controversial areas that's full of a lot of mythologies regarding AI and student-produced work around AI is the notion of AI detection. So some kind of magic bullet that's all-seeing and would be able to tell whether or not a student had used AI for the production of writing. That's largely what these AI detectors do. Is like you give it a writing sample and it will claim to tell you that it knows whether or not it was produced by AI or not. So I guess one of the things is that there's a bit of a kind of a moral panic right now about students cheating with AI. In fact, a lot of the tools that are out there that market to higher ed try to really create that sense that, students are cheating with it. And I've, again, because of the book and the work that I do with AAC&U, I've been on a lot of college campuses this spring, and I've had faculty come up to me and say, I think all of my students are cheating with AI. And I'm like, what do you think that? It's like, well, I mean, I teach freshman writing and like all of their essays sound the same. And I'm like, so you teach 18-year-olds and all of their essays sound the same? And you think that, so it's like, I don't know whether that's the best indicator of whether or not students are cheating with AI. In fact, humans, we get it right in studies, given samples of real writing and AI generated writing. One study found that we get it right, professors get it right 54% of the time. So we're not real good at detecting AI. So probably the biggest product out there on the market is something provided by turnitin.com. And they had a press release earlier this month where they were heralding their AI detection software as having its 1 year anniversary. And they said that they had reviewed more than 200 million papers. And of those 200 million, they noted that 22 million had been flagged as having at least 20% AI writing. So just looking at this massive sample, if we trust the numbers from Turnitin, or if we move our concerns away and just go with the numbers that are here, well, then that means that it's about 10 or 11% of students have turned in writing that was produced by AI. If we trust these numbers, it's a 10% problem. So in a class of 30, that means 3 students. So the notion that all of our students are cheating with AI, or all of our students are using it, turning in writing, that's probably not accurate. So the challenge isn't I teach a class of 30 and I've got 30 students who are all cheating. It's probably more accurate that you have a class of 30 and maybe there's 2, 3, or 4 that are considering turning in work that was produced by AI. Now, that doesn't mean that students aren't using AI in other ways. So as an example of how would you detect this, so you have an assignment. I, as a student, might say, okay, so here's this assignment. Can you provide me with an outline for a 5-page paper that would meet the expectations of this assignment? Oh, and by the way, here's the rubric that's going to be used to score. So the outline should match that. So in other words, I get an outline out of AI, but I write every word that shows up within the paper. Or I write the paper and then I give my paper and the assignment to AI, and I ask AI, can you provide me with feedback on my essay? How could I improve it to meet the goals as outlined in the assignment? So there are lots of ways students are currently using AI, but these last two, give me an outline or give me feedback. In your class, would you consider that cheating? That's kind of the question. Like, is that cheating? Certainly, AI wrote the thing for me and I turn it in and it's 80% AI. Certainly, I think we would agree that would be a case of cheating. But given that we probably can expect human AI hybrid writing as the norm going forward, should we be encouraging sort of like get help with an outline, get feedback, or are these things that we want to discourage? Either way, we'd want to make it clear within the assignment parameters. I'll talk more about policy here in just a second. But from the various tools out there, accuracy varies wildly, and students already know how to kind of, there's like a whole bunch of myths within Instagram with students talking about how you can fool AI detectors, such as, one example that had been on the internet for a good 6 months was, hey, just put in some typos. If you have typos, AI doesn't misspell, and so then AI detectors will not know. And there was a study from just last month that looked at a lot of these myths about how can you fool AI detection. And yeah, a lot of these work, some to different degrees than others, but yeah, add some spelling errors, it reduces the chances that you're going to get caught. So initially, when Turnitin came to market with its AI detection software, it said it had a 1% false positive rate. So out of 100 students that it might say used AI, only one of them would have been falsely accused. And a lot of universities were sort of comfortable with that. Also, you couldn't turn it off. If you had the AI plagiarism detector, it was just on, But when Turnitin revised their figure from 1% to 4% false positive in the beginning of the fall semester, a number of universities said that was too much collateral damage from a student perspective. So Vanderbilt, Michigan State, University of Texas, and many others turned off the AI detection software once you could turn it off. So when you go back to that press release from Turnitin, okay, so they said 200 million papers, 22 million flagged. Well, if there's a 4% false positive rate, then that means almost 1 million students have been falsely flagged for using AI when they did not. that's a massive amount of collateral damage, especially at a time where we already know there's a student mental health crisis in higher education. I think that if I was a student, I would rather get an F in a class than to be falsely accused of cheating in a class. Also, there are other issues around higher education. I mean, confidence in higher education continues to fall in America. It's exceptionally low. It continues from these Gallup surveys, is gets lower and lower. A lot of American institutions like the presidency and K-12 education can also have similar trends in less confidence. But we have higher ed has an array of challenges right now, and I'm not sure that having this scope of false accusation of our student population is wise because of the two concerns on the screen. But also, is it the return on investment here? Is this likely to have, I guess it's like, which is more evil, a student cheating or a student being falsely accused of cheating? In our focus groups in November and December, just as we were at the stretch for the book, we heard time and again, and this is a direct quote from one student, but we heard this sentiment from multiple students in multiple focus groups on multiple campuses. We're not worried about being caught cheating with AI. We're worried that we're going to be falsely accused of cheating with AI. Everyone knows someone that has happened to. So I think from my perspective, I think right now, this is probably the worst generative AI is ever going to be. It's only going to get better at mimicking our voices. I mean, you can already now attach samples of work. You can go to Claude and say, here's 5 articles that I've written, write something on this topic and use my voice and use my idioms. It's getting better and better at writing like me. So today's the worst it's ever going to be going forward. And I think that probably means that this is probably the best that AI detection is ever going to be. So I really feel this is something that we shouldn't use in higher ed, AI detection tools. I think the bottom line comes down to a handful of questions. One I really want to highlight, though, like, given the issues with false positives and also false negatives, like who gets let through, in other words, who uses AI, but the AI detection tools don't catch you. It's usually those that are using the more expensive, the tools you have to pay for, the latest versions of the tools. So who's more likely to have those tools? Is it likely to be your Pell eligible students or your affluent students? So there's inequities baked into these tools. So I think ultimately, if you're not willing to be transparent about these detection issues, false positives and false negatives, with your students in writing on your syllabus, then you probably shouldn't be using them. I think that's sort of like the bottom line thought about these tools. But if you're willing to be transparent, I think that being transparent with your students, it would be the only way to go with these. And certainly there are students who have been falsely accused and have lost scholarships, and they're lawyering up against those institutions as we speak. There's cases in the media right now. So it's kind of a mess. But I think ultimately, the world is indeed changing outside of the academy. And one example, I had a colleague share with me that she had a student. She teaches business writing. She has a student who was a part-time student, working full-time, and the student was doing a lot of like PR and copy stuff and emails and correspondence and stuff like that for a small business she was working for. And her boss told her a year ago, you have to use ChatGPT to start with, because you can get a draft, you can make the edits, you can customize for our audience and our voice, but it's going to save you a lot of time. Instead of you taking an hour to do a PR, a press release, you'll be able to do it in 15 or 20 minutes if you get a draft first from ChatGPT. So Real World said, you must use ChatGPT. In her business writing class, my friend, the colleague, said, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. And so the student was like, why am I here? I'm here to prepare me for the world of work. And what you're having me do doesn't mirror at all the way that I'm being told I have to do things on the job. And of course, in a context that aligns almost identically to this course. So of course we want to, often part of our pedagogy is to teach students things that sometimes you can't use the technology. So that needs to be made transparent to students. in those contexts. But ultimately, what we call cheating, the business world is now calling progress. So, all of these different shifts that we're seeing around see the patient, not the technology, so that you can do more of what AI can't. So, start with ChatGPT to get that draft so that you can go on to other more important things for the business. That's how things are shifting, for students beyond graduation. So some are calling for us to redefine plagiarism, to see human AI writing, as I mentioned earlier, as becoming normal, and that maybe we need to rethink our definition of plagiarism. And then also maybe rethink what our definitions are of average. In fact, there's a book I wrote a couple of years ago. Well, it's like 7 years ago now at this point. Jose and I wrote that one together, and we had a rubric for scoring student work. And in the rubric, we had like C, B, and A level and descriptions of what various things were within that context. But looking at what AI can produce, I don't know how we would call work entirely produced by AI, how we would give a student a C for that work. They got the right prompt. Is that why they get a C? Maybe we need to rethink our definitions of what average is, given that AI can perform and produce what was previously known as average work. So basically, I'm talking about raising the bar when we grade and raising the bar on assignments. So focus on maybe more complex tasks. This little pyramid thing here, so I'm sure many of you have seen, it's been around for 70 years. It's Bloom's taxonomy. And it's, you go up the pyramid and it's higher order learning outcomes. And, the work that we're going to be asked to do a lot in the real world going forward is going to be around, we need to analyze what you get from AI. You need to evaluate the quality, look for bias, look for errors, look for hallucinations, and then you need to move to creation. You need to edit that document. So maybe a lot of our assignments, again, depending on the discipline and depending on the learning outcomes you might have, but moving students toward higher order learning outcomes is a good goal anyways. But have students do more work that mirrors the real world or is actually in the real world, such as experiential learning. So like undergraduate research projects or service learning, those kinds of things, among AAC&U's list of high impact practices. But maybe that's the suggestion of how we sort of meet the grand challenge, is move in this direction in terms of assignments and in terms of expectations. Thinking about AI policies specifically, I think certainly everyone's syllabus should have an AI policy, but I think from assignment to assignment, it's wise to have a section that specifically addresses AI, because again, there's times when you want students to do work without AI, and there's times where you might want them to leverage it or to develop AI literacies within your discipline, within your course using AI. So saying specifically, when is AI use permitted or forbidden? Do you want students to turn in for a particular assignment, like the prompts that they gave AI and what were the responses that they got? How do you credit AI? I think ultimately pushing students to sort of notions of like ultimate accountability is with you, regardless of what AI might produce, if it's allowed in this assignment. Whatever you turn in, if there are errors, you own those errors. If there are hallucinations, those are yours. If there are false citations, those are yours. So it increases the sense that students should have accountability and own the work that's produced, and to edit and revise and evaluate the work that comes from AI. So just a couple more thoughts, and then I want to turn it over to Margaret for Q&A. But I think there's a number of low intervention strategies that research has shown that are highly efficacious for this grand challenge. I mean, number one, if the issue is it's a 10% issue, it's a class of 30, and you've got 3 students who might cheat or use AI for an assignment, whenever we don't want them to use AI for assignment, or turn in AI produced work whenever we don't want them to turn in AI produced work. There's a number of things that we can do. Talking about academic integrity in an affirming way. So rather than sort of like, hey, I'm trying to catch you guys, but more like speaking of integrity, like, when is integrity important in your life? And so people might talk about work or a team sport or sometime when integrity has mattered to them. And then say, well, that extends into this class, like this course, it has integrity, and we want to make sure that everyone's work is their own. And so reminding students of that, it decreases the probability that students will indeed cheat. But of course, when do students cheat? It's whenever they've got an opportunity, which AI and other tools out there on the web before AI provides opportunities. But then it's often because, they don't have, they're under some kind of crunch. Either they don't know how to do the work, or they don't have enough time to do the work. And there's a lot of students who have busy lives who work while in college and the like. So one example that I would suggest from this list, I'll talk a little bit about, is the idea of having some flexibility. So like if you had 5 writing assignments within your class, maybe for 3 of them, for any 3, a student can ask for a 48-hour extension without any questions asked. So if a student is feeling pressured, wow, I don't think I'm gonna get this done, and it's a Sunday night, rather than moving to cheat, if they had a release valve, being the email the professor and turn it in 48 hours late, many students would choose to, I'll take the extension so that I can do the work myself. I think ultimately that's what we want students to do. I mean, that's when the learning takes place, is when they're doing the assignments. So just having more flexibility, thinking about reasonable workloads, knowing your students and your student population and the kind of lives they lead, there's some adjustments that we can make to be more flexible in our courses that will decrease the chances students will cheat, increase the chances that students will do the work, which means it's going to increase the chances that they're going to learn. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Margaret. Margaret, I think you've got a couple of questions for me. More than happy to chat.
I do have a couple. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, we don't have a great deal of time, but there's a couple of good questions. Let's begin. First, what does the future look like for faculty or institutions that do integrate AI versus those who do not, or are very slow to adapt? What does the future look like?
Yeah, so I have been on futurist panels in the past, and I've always been the boring futurist. Like when MOOCs, the massive open online courses were about. I remember being on a panel 10 years ago, and the person sitting next to me was asked, what's higher ed going to look like in 5 years? And he said, there's only going to be 20 to 50 universities, because why would you take, psychology at your local community college whenever you can have the best professor at Harvard teach you that course? But when the question came to me, I've always been the one that said, I don't think it's going to, higher ed's going to look a lot like it does now. MOOCs we'll find a place for them, but it's not going to change the culture of higher ed. Higher ed will largely look the way that it currently looks. So that I've always been the conservative, the futurist that saw nuance and incremental change. This is the first time in my career that I feel like this is a significant shift. A significant shift is required in the DNA of the way that we teach our courses and in our curricula. Given the rate of adoption in the world of work, I think that institutions that make a rapid turn to adopt AI in its pedagogical practice, as well as its business practices. I mean, speaking with some people at AAU universities and seeing how they've rapidly shifted their IRB processes and their contracting processes and a number of other things, I think it's going to give those schools a competitive advantage going forward. I think there's so many challenges for higher ed, and of course we're approaching an enrollment cliff in the next year or two that's going to make enrollment. Some institutions will be significantly challenged as a result of that. This is another similar impact, I think. So like I don't know that higher ed, that it's a wise positioning to not be actively discerning how we can incorporate AI into business practices, but also our teaching and learning, knowing that it's really going to be essential for preparing students for life beyond college.
Thank you. Thank you. Here's another one. In addition to delivery of instructional material, to what extent will AI be utilized in evaluation of academic or other types of performance? Can you project that?
So I can make some predictions, and I think that there are opportunities for higher ed to resist what I think is forthcoming. But if I was a learning management system company and I already have tools where students submit work, and then faculty would grade it, and then it would be the grade would be populated in the grade book. I'm sure that every one of the LMS companies, so this would be Canvas and Desire to Learn and Blackboard and others, they'll be coming to market with tools within the LMS that can do just that, that could score student work or provide a score for student work. But then, of course, what is the role for the faculty member in that particular context? Maybe it's a partnership in the grading. Maybe that's the way that we approach um, those opportunities, but there's no doubt that tools are going to emerge, and some of them already are in different contexts. But there will be opportunities for us to maybe save some time with grading, but I think ultimately we need to have a high degree of confidence in what the AI produces. And if I was a student, I could see like this isn't this what I'm paying to go to college for? I want you to grade because you're the expert. I don't want an AI, generic generative AI tool, um, even using your rubric scoring my work. So there's a landscape, a mountain range of challenge ahead of us with the opportunities that generative AI is going to produce for us in terms of tools that can help with things like grading and other forms of assessment.
Okay, I think we just have one more, but this is a good one.
Okay.
How may AI tools impact skills such as critical thinking, self-awareness, or reflection? This person says, I am especially concerned as a counselor educator that students will not read the original texts and take time to apply them for greater cultural self-awareness and critical thinking. How many AI tools, Ed?
Yeah, so here's this is a new signature pedagogical practice that will need to emerge within higher ed is helping students understand what to do with that work. I mean, we are so product driven, and especially K-20, we're kind of product driven, whether or not you make something and you turn it in, or whether you complete your dissertation and you turn it in. We're very product driven, not necessarily, especially at the undergraduate level, heavy into process. But now we need to mirror the practices in the classroom, in our pedagogy, that we expect students to employ. So for instance, if we are going to say we're raising the bar, you can begin by creating a draft of this assignment with AI, but then what do you do from there? And of course, a lot of students' inclination, especially younger, I just want to turn this in because I'm done, right? I've got something that's 5 pages. I can turn this in. But rather, like in class, give samples of like, this is AI produced work. So what happens now? And so then scaffold what that would look like. So, okay, well, you need to read through it, highlight things that you might question yourself, like what, this doesn't sound right. Also, if you have a paper and it's got 20 citations, it produces citations for you from ChatGPT. Research on ChatGPT alone, there are other tools that can kind of do this work, but ChatGPT alone, it has like a 29% error rate with the citations, like false or hallucinated citations. So if there's that high of a rate, the student then is responsible for looking up every one of those, verifying the quotes, finding alternatives, because often the information is correct, but the citation is wrong. So there's a lot of work that students have to do. So like teaching them this in class, spend a couple of class periods and have them walk through that work. Or maybe that's a homework assignment is I'm giving you the AI assignment. Now I want you to find, I've reviewed this and there's 22 errors or flaws in this. You need to find at least 15 of them. Come back to class on Friday. So this becomes a part of the pedagogical process. Is if you expect the students to do this without being taught, that's probably not a good assumption. this is part of what we have to teach students how to do going forward. It's a new skill.
Well, I'm going to get, even though we have only a minute left, I'm going to ask you one last question. I expect to see more faculty using generative AI to create assessments of student competency. In high volume environments, it's almost inevitable. Is this something we would not want our students to emulate? Should faculty disclose this? Is it ethical, particularly if AI does a good job most of the time?
Wow, that's a whole bunch of questions in 1 minute. I will say, I think our best path forward is to be transparent with our students as we try new things, because we will not have tested every use case under the sun. And so I think our students, if we choose to use some of these tools, these new tools, for these kinds of purposes, we should be transparent. And then we should see our students as partners in discerning what works and what doesn't. So while we might save ourselves 2 hours in grading by using these tools, we should set aside maybe 2 hours for additional office hours to have students come and talk to us whenever they're concerned about the grade that they got. It's like, I think this is right. The AI said it was wrong. I need an arbiter, and you're the professor. You need to be here to do this. So I think that that's what the trade-off is to do more of what AI can't. We are the content experts as the faculty. We have the ability then to help students, and help ensure that the technology results in the correct grade, the correct answer, if you will, at the end of that scoring process.
Excellent. Oh, Ed, I want to thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye
You're very
bye.
welcome. Take care.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you, thank you.